speaking of attendance, today for our Parent Advisory Board meeting, we have a topic for discussion that is front and center on so many Queens parents' minds, and that is the new grading policy as well as the proposed changes to screened applications. And so today we have a number of officials from the Department of Education with us to present, which will take a few moments, and then we'd open the floor up to questions. But before I introduce our officials from the DOE, I just wanted to introduce, well, not introduce, someone who needs no introduction, of course, our Queens representative, Deb Dillingham, on the citywide panel for education policy. As many of you know, steer the education policies for the entire city of New York. Deb, are there any remarks that you'd like to make to address our attendees tonight?
Hi, welcome everyone. Just want to say it's been a busy couple of weeks, and thanks to all of you from Queens who actually came on to the PEP meeting last week. It was a 7-hour meeting, thanks to Zoom and WebEx. But the great thing was that we had a lot of participation, which doesn't always happen because of people traveling. I did want to let everybody know that the next PEP meeting is going to be on June 18th. And that right now will be through Zoom. And also on the grading policy and the admissions, you can always write to me at the PEP, in addition to writing to the BP if you want me to share any information at the DOE level. And that's about it for now. Looking forward to hearing you speak tonight.
All right, thanks, Deb. I know you've been very, very busy. That's probably an understatement in recent weeks. But thanks for doing what you do. And so, without further ado, our officials from the Department of Education, and let's see, let me make sure I have the names correctly. And for those who are just tuning in, this is also being recorded and is live streaming on our website, www.queensbp.org. And if you go to the education page, which is queensbp.org/education, you will find the agenda for tonight's Queens Parent Advisory Board meeting, which includes a list of our guest speakers. We have Sarah Kleinhandler, Chief Enrollment Officer at the Department of Education, accompanied by Gabrielle Ramos-Solomon, First Deputy in the Office of Student Enrollment in the DOE, as well as Sadye Campoamor, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that, Director of Community Affairs at the DOE. And so whenever you're ready, we are here to listen.
Hi, it's Sadye. Is Sadye on?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So I'll start with some background around the admissions for middle and high schools, screen schools in particular. I want to start by saying there has been no decisions yet on what admissions will look like for screen schools next year. We are currently in the midst of robust engagement to hear ideas about what admissions should look like next year, given the diverse needs of families. And because of the crisis, we know that state tests were suspended, that attendance was suspended for fall 2021 admissions, and the grading policies have changed. And these changes we know have impacts on admissions. And so we are doing robust engagement to hear people's ideas about what would be fair for students. Just some background information. Screen schools use academic information about applicants to select them for admissions. And most schools use a combination of final grades, state test scores, and attendance to calculate a rank for students. We have about 195 middle schools and 125 high schools that use screened admissions to allow students to give students seats. And so we are trying to determine how to adjust admissions to these screen programs now. And while we don't have a policy yet, as I stated in the beginning, we do know that the crisis has impacted families differently across the city. And we know that students have lost loved ones, they're taking the responsibility of caring for their siblings. And we need a policy that's fair, clear, and transparent. And so we're asking different community groups what they think would be a fair policy for this 1 year amendment to admissions. And we've heard already from some groups are, and again, there's been no decision at this moment, but we have heard from some groups, they're calling for us to suspend screening. We have heard from other groups to use substitute data and other factors to think about how admissions would work for these middle and high schools. And we're making these changes in response to the pandemic. They're going to go into effect, as I said, for 1 year. And we assess screens every year, and we engage with stakeholders whenever we propose changes. And that's what we're doing now. And I'm glad, Sadye, that you joined because Sadye will be able to talk a little bit about what kinds of engagement that we are currently doing across the city.
Sure, is now
Yeah.
good time or
Yeah, it's great
I don't
time.
wanna
Yeah,
jump in.
no, it's perfect time.
Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I apologize for being a couple minutes late. I am a caregiver and a mama, and so we are balancing all the work from home and all the identities within the same 500 square feet. So I want to give a shout out to all the families. I took a quick look at the participants. And so really nice to see parent leaders from our President's Council, Jessica Zillow, as well as CEC members from across Queens. I see Deborah, and I'm sure that there are others. So good evening, everybody. My name is Sadye Campoamor. I support community affairs for the Department of Education, and so have the honor of working across the city for families and engaging stakeholders such as students, advocates, community-based organizations, school communities, parents, of course, educators, as primary partners in educational transformation. And that's been particularly important during this time. And so again, want to give a shout out to the parent leaders who I've been on actually a number of calls with, just talking about general COVID updates, and having you guys turnkey that information and passing it forward to your communities is really critical, not because it's a nice thing to do, but because you're actually helping keeping folks safe when we keep families informed. And so we're gathered here today to talk about, of course, multiple topics that you want, but we have the expertise from our teaching and learning division and our chief academic officer, hi Katie, as well as, of course, our leaders in student enrollment. And so some of the time we come to community members and try to sort of share public policy that we think is great. Today, I want to echo Sarah's sentiment that we're not coming to you with a fully baked or a baked proposal, but actually an open question, keeping in mind the spirit of that COVID has upended all of our lives and just shifted our daily experience in profound ways. But of course, also because we don't have test scores and don't have the same measures that we did. And so it's a really important conversation. And I think in essence, my office's job is to put the public back in public policy. And so I'm excited to get into some Q&A. I'm seeing some lively comments here. Again, just want to echo as many times as needed, that we don't have a policy here, that we're actually really excited to hear your feedback. So, anything that starts with hearing rumors, of course, can be confusing, especially during these times, but want to just name that we are here to listen and here to hear how it might impact you. And of course, thinking about the context that COVID has had impacts that have disproportionately impacted certain families, put some of our students who are our best and brightest in positions of caregiving for their siblings. So I don't know, should I turn it over back to Sharon? Is there anything else I should say? Should I list who we're hearing from? Was that something?
No, that was great, Sadie.
Okay.
And I was remiss, and I think I did not introduce Katherine Maro, also known as Katie, the Chief of Staff in the Office of Policy and Evaluation. Am I getting that right?
I'm the Chief of Staff for the Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Linda Chen.
Got it. Okay. And if my team at Borough Hall, if we can update the webpage with Katie on the agenda, that would be great. Ms. Maro, would you like to say a few words? Ms.
Looked
Maro,
like
would
she
you like to say a
froze.
few
Sure,
words?
it
I
There you
think
go.
would be
she
my
froze
pleasure,
a
Borough
little bit.
President. Oh, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yep.
Okay, great. So I thank you so much for having us again. We were excited to come a few weeks ago as we were rolling out our grading policy and to hear from parents and to hear from constituents. Just really quickly, so our grading policy we came out with a few weeks ago, and is for this time. It is for during our period of remote learning, and then when we return to school, when that happens, that we will we will resume our grading policy. So our grading policy takes into account that we wanted to be flexible and we wanted to be understanding of what families were going through right now. But at the same time, having a clear way of understanding where students are and being able to ensure that students are receiving the supports that they need during this time. So our grading policy is bucketed in 3 ways for our students in grades kindergarten through 5th grade, for our students in 6th through 8th grade, and for our high school students. Our pre-K students and 3K students don't receive grades. It is about play and communication. So for our kindergarten through 5th grade students, schools must use existing grading scales for marking period grades for the rest of the school year. And then schools will award final grades of meet standards or needs improvements. And then for our 6th through 8th grade, schools will use their existing grading scales for marking periods for the rest of the school year. And then schools will award final grades of meet standards, needs improvement, or course in progress. And then schools define for both for K through 8 how meet standards and needs improvement relates to their grading scales and practices. For high school students, it looks a little bit different. Schools will use their existing grading scales for marking period grades through the rest of the year. And then schools will calculate final grades using their existing grading scales and calculation methods. But students, excuse me, please, who would receive final grades of failing would be awarded instead a grade of course in progress. And also for students for whom there is insufficient work to determine a final grade. One of the other updates we made was that knowing everything that our families are going through and wanting to be coming back to our priority of being flexible. After students are awarded their grades for final grades that are passing, parents and guardians may make the final decision about whether to keep that final grade that's in the existing grading scale that the school is using, or they can update it to, it would be a credit or CR on their report card. And then the credit would not be included in a student's GPA. Am I good? That's
Ms. Maro,
Oh,
you're
no.
coming
Did
in
I
a little bit
freeze?
in and out. No, you're back.
okay. Sorry, I'm having some internet issues, I think. Let me try. What did you not hear?
That's a tricky
I think you got through a lot of it, Katie, and I
Hey.
think that it'll be particularly helpful if, when we start to move into questions. I think we can Queensborough President Lee point to Katie if there's some folks who have more sort of in the weeds questions, if you will, on the grading policy. But I think we got the overview. Thanks, Katie.
Sorry, guys.
No problem. Thank you, Ms. Maro, and welcome back from last month.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, of course. Deb asked me to mention the admissions engagement on May 28th. That will be tomorrow. Sadie, can you share with our parents on how parents can sign up for that?
Absolutely. Is it easy that I just put it in the chat, or I put it in Q&A just so that everybody can have the link right there?
That would be great. And if you can also verbalize it for folks who are viewing this through the live stream, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. So we are beginning our borough admissions policy feedback sessions tonight, actually. And we are going by borough. So we're starting in the Bronx this evening, and tomorrow we'll be in Queens. Going into next week, here we go. I'm just gonna copy and paste this here. Going to next week, where we'll hear, actually on Friday, we'll hear from Staten Island, on Monday, Manhattan, and Tuesday, Brooklyn. So it is, fast and furious, but it's also an opportunity for us to hear that perhaps we needed one more that was for a citywide audience. So we're thinking about even just adding another one in case there are conflicts, and we know that hearing from about things quickly is tight turnaround. So we're thinking about what else we can do. We're also doing forums like this. Is this a good place to put them on chat or Q&A? And the link got lost here.
If you put it in one, and then our team will make sure that it's covered in the other chat room as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. But if there are, and I believe that there's CEC members here who have also had opportunities, other parent groups. I know I spoke with some D30 parent advocates, and I know that our teams have spoken with the CEC presidents and other parent groups. So we hope that we can hear from as many folks as possible.
Great. I'm reading that the sound quality is not that great. So I'm going to ask everyone to be sure to mute yourselves. And then also for my team at Borough Hall, if you can help us out with the technical and mute us if we forget to mute ourselves until it's time to speak. So for the remainder of our meeting today, the remaining 70 minutes, we'll focus on the Q&A, as many as we can. We know that we had a little over 140 folks who had pre-registered for this webinar, for this Parent Advisory Board meeting. For folks who are logged in through the Zoom webinar, we're going to remind you to kindly be sure to put your questions into the Q&A chat room, not the webinar chat room. And also I'm going to ask my team at Borough Hall to double back and make sure that all the questions in the webinar chat room are consolidated in the Q&A, just so that we can make sure to get through as many as we can. I see that we have a couple dozen questions already in the hopper. So we'll just dive right in. The person who needs no introduction this evening is Monica Gutierrez, my Director for Education here at Borough Hall. And Ms. Gutierrez will facilitate the Q&A. Ready when you are.
All right. Good evening, everybody. All right, so we're going to start the Q&A. I just want to let everybody know, if you want to submit a question, on the bottom of your screen, you'll see the word Q&A, and you can type it in there. We're going to be also monitoring the chat. So just in case you're looking where the Q&A button is, all the way in the bottom towards the middle. All right, so first question. If it's up to the schools to decide the grades and who is meeting standards and needs improvement, then why not let the individual schools decide their own criteria for screen admissions the same way they always have?
Hi, thanks. Thanks for that question. I think that that is why we are going out and listening to boroughs, different groups that Sadie spoke about, to hear this kind of feedback. And all of that feedback we definitely will make public with the outcomes of this. We'll make public and make sure that we are able to demonstrate how those factored into any decisions that are made. Again, no decisions are made right now, but this is the kind of feedback that we want to hear as we move through the city. So thank you.
All right.
I also just wanted to clarify, I thought I heard that the question was on grading policy, like why a citywide grading policy if schools are going to be left up. So I want to make sure that Katie also gets a chance because it's important to sort of address the chancellor's thinking as well.
Yep. So our grading policy is citywide. The way it works with what I was explaining that I hope you got most of, but just like our schools during the non-COVID time, schools have a grading scale they use, and then when we say grading scale, we mean like 1 to 100, ABC on a 5-point scale, and so very similarly, like when we are not in COVID, when we are not in remote learning, schools use this, and we have citywide guidance and grading policy, and there's a citywide policy for enrollment for admissions, if that makes sense.
Okay, I have another question submitted by Irene Revsky. Why grades 9 through 12 have an option, has an option to have a binary grade instead of actual grades, but K through 8 does not have that option?
So when we were engaging stakeholders and when we were working on this policy, what we continued to hear was the importance of flexibility. Another thing that we heard was that, especially for our younger students, we know the role that our families are playing, especially for our youngest learners, our K2 who are pre-readers. And so we, the piece of flexibility in the binary scale lent itself to that. But when we were thinking about our high school students, as we were thinking about students' futures, when we were thinking about not knowing exactly what colleges will be looking for, what post-secondary institution we'll be looking for after this, we wanted to make sure that there were options available for students. But then we also wanted to take into account the flexibility that was needed during this time, and that, if there was a way that students were struggling, if there was, we wanted to take that into account, and so then gave the option for the binary there.
All right. Another question, how will the new grading policy affect the high school admissions process?
Hi. So as I stated, we are listening to the city right now. We don't have a policy right now that has been that has come down. We want to hear from people. We want to hear from people on how they think grades should be used, if grades should be used. We've been hearing from lots of different stakeholders at this point, and we continue to listen. And once we have a policy, we will ensure that we are very transparent about how that came to be.
Okay. All right. This is a different question. All right. How does the DOE plan to handle admissions if in September it is still unsafe to open schools? It will be difficult for kids to transition to a new school via online. Is the DOE prepared for this? And what backup plan does the DOE have?
So I'm going to take the first part of the question just because I think it's on the top of everybody's mind. Certainly as a soon-to-be public school parent, I'm hoping that I can send my kid to school, and I think health conditions permitting, we are going to prepare to open like same old, and then we're also running multiple different scenarios, whether that's staggered school or different schedules or what equipment would be needed, everything from how we would do dismissal, what lunch times would look like, assemblies, PTA meetings. So we're thinking about all of those things. We're running multiple different scenarios, and so we remain optimistic, of course, that things could really change course and we could all be back in the seats the same way, but we also know that we need to prepare for multiple different things. And so we're working with many of our partners, but I'm open to ideas, of course, and your creativity, but just know that we have not sort of landed on exactly what, September first school will look like just yet. But we're planning for a bunch of different things. I sort of the range from as optimistic you can get and as pessimistic. And I'm not sure that it impacts admissions for September, but I'll let Sarah.
Yeah, so our offers for this September have been released. So 3K offers, pre-K offers have gone out, kindergarten offers, 6th grade and 9th grade offers have gone out. So in terms of school reopening, just as Sadye said, we're waiting to hear. But those offers have been released. 3K offers go out in June, just so everybody's clear.
And June is next week.
Yes, it is.
Not a lot of time. Not a lot of time. And I'm seeing a lot of the questions, and also we've been hearing a lot here at Borough Hall from parents. A lot of the angst with the lack of predictability, which, you know, by its nature, the pandemic is caused an unenviable position for all of you, everyone at the Department of Education. But, you know, 2 months in, there is an increasing angst about the lack of predictability after a sustained unpredictable period. Aside from some of the offer letters that we anticipate for some of the next week, what's the time frame for some of the things that we can plan for now that we are, you know, since we last met, we are closer to a reopening phase, you know, knock on wood, and we hit all our metrics. But how have things changed in terms of some more predictability for our parents for the coming months?
I can take the first step. I think that the way we've been thinking about it is 4 major priorities for the DOE in our COVID-19 response. The first, of course, is maintaining health and safety of our communities, of our students, of our families. The second is remote learning and ensuring that all families and students have what they need to participate in remote learning. And so there's been an enormous push to get students the devices. To date, we've distributed over 280,000 tablets, and will continue to do so, of course. And just to note, because I think it's a good thing, is that we're averaging an 86.1% daily engagement rate from students. The third, of course, is the delivery of core services, and the fourth is longer term implications and planning. And then the last thing, of course, the uncertainty that we're all dealing with and in our personal, interpersonal, and otherwise lives. What I call the sort of unresolved COVID challenges are, of course, this state and city budget crisis, the collective grief and trauma that our school communities and ourselves, many of us, are dealing with every single day, and then, of course, navigating a future in that ambiguity. So I hope that that's like a helpful outline of how we're thinking about it. I can get into the details of any of those, but the sort of 4 major priorities are sort of the 4 tracks that we've been planning
on. So I have a question. Will the specialized high schools be affected by the new grading policy?
So I think that it is the grading policy. I would kick to Katie, but if the question is, are they up for discussion regarding the admissions?
Yeah, admissions, correct.
Admissions, yeah. So that's not included. Exactly. Okay, great. That is not.
Yeah.
But they are part of our citywide grading policies. Citywide grading policy, if it's helpful, has a lot of different tentacles. It impacts a lot of different things, from summer learning to promotion policy to admissions. And of course, they're all interconnected because we're an ecosystem, but sort of hard to parse out.
Okay, great. Given that the DOE has removed final grades this year for only K-8, will the public be provided with a breakdown of which parent groups or CECs were contacted? This is for transparency.
Yes. Thank you very much. So yes, we will make the engagement public, and as I said before, we will demonstrate how the outcomes have factored in, how the outcomes of the public engagement have factored in. So yes, we will have that once we are finished with our engagement.
All right. Question by Suzanne Assator. Can you commit that each of the Queen CECs will be consulted now regarding the admissions criteria for screen schools?
If they haven't already, absolutely. And we encourage CECs to, you know, via through the CEC president or however else, to please write to us. You can write to enrollmentfeedback@schools.nyc.gov. And then of course, the executive superintendents will be hosting the borough meetings where parent leaders will, from the districts, will be able to have the opportunity to open. And then we'll take questions from the audience by district.
I'm seeing some concerns being expressed in the chat room, and you know, I think in case there's misinformation, let's clear it out here. There are some concerns about engagement or lack thereof on the part of the department to the public, to parents, etc. So, you know, I don't want to put you in a defensive position. If you can just give us a sense of the outreach efforts on the part of the Department of Education in recent weeks, as well as things that are planned. I know you mentioned some of them, but if you can just reiterate that, because I'm concerned about that concern being expressed by some of the parents, and I'm wondering if it's a perception or if it's in reality the case that Queens is not being outreached to as much as our other counterparts in other parts of the city.
Yes, so I think that, you know, you're remarkably lucky because you have folks who want to be engaged, and so that's a really good thing. I think
it's a very good thing.
No, it's incredible. That's why we're all like participating in this kind of civic engagement. And so I want to just name that. I really appreciate that. Our Family and Community Engagement Division has been in touch with, and if you haven't been, then like, let's correct it. But this is my understanding that has been in touch with the individual presidents' councils across the city, as well as individual CECs to have like preliminary conversations. This is happening. In addition to that, at the Chancellor's Parent Advisory Council, that's comprised of the PTA presidents across the district. I know I'm not talking to novices, but I use a lot of acronyms, so I want to make sure that everyone understands. That's what we call CPAC. Our Deputy Chancellor Josh Wallach was just there. Was it last month? I'm looking at Sarah as if she can see me, but yeah, he was just there. I think he agreed that the conversation could continue into the next month. Again, that's an opportunity for citywide presidents, council presidents to come together. And then of course, CECs formed under Chancellor Farina, what is Education Council Consortium. And I think up to as many as 200 CEC members are a part of that. And Deputy Chancellor Wallach also attended that. He also spoke with the CPAC Executive Board, as well as the steering committee. I could be saying that title wrong, of the Education Council Consortium made up of CECs. So that's of the formal parent leader discussions. In addition to that, I've supported advocate discussions. So today we had a conversation with students in temporary housing advocates, as well as some of our DOE staff who serve as SDH coordinators, so that we can ensure that we're elevating that voice. We spoke to multiple different student groups, so have held, I believe, 4 sessions with students across, which are citywide. We have met with a group called D30 Equity Now from District 30, who reached out to speak with us. We met with Place New York City, some of their board members, and are going back to actually hear from their bigger membership. We've talked to the Coalition from Educational Justice. That's another parent group, as well as Good Shepherd Services, who's thinking about putting together a roundtable of District 79 students and educators. We've spoken to some principals, some superintendents, community board members. Yesterday, we met with Brooklyn NAACP and other clergy leaders. We've met with the Arise Coalition. I'm not actually working from a list. I could get you a list, but that is, let's see, the New York Immigration Coalition, a coalition of Asian American advocates, some of which I might have been on this call. So that's sort of the list of folks. Is there a world where we could do even more outreach? This is a huge city, and the answer is absolutely. And so if folks want to pull together a group, I would love to partner and hear more.
Thank you for
And
that rundown, Ms.
Oh.
Campoamor. Yes, please.
I was
Ms.
just going to say, and
Ramos.
just to piggyback off of all of Sadie's comments so far and the rundown of the engagement that's been done today, I think it was really important for us to just hear from families in general, which is one of the reasons why we are hosting these town halls in the coming days, so that we can hear directly from parents about their thoughts around the admissions policy for next year. So we really wanted to make sure that we were getting as wide a swath of perspectives as we could, not just from parent leaders, but just generally speaking as well.
And I think you hit it right, the nail on the head. For the parents who are tuning in here, for our parent advisory board, for the parents who are not feeling that their opinions and concerns are being heard and voiced, what's the one avenue that you would recommend to the parents who are tuning in, regardless of any of the hats, and that's plural, hats that they may wear? For a public school parent to voice their concerns and opinions about these policy changes, and not wanting to be limited by their sort of representatives on all these different acronyms that you just mentioned. It's an alphabet soup right there. What is a central way that you would recommend?
So I just put the enrollment feedback at schools on.
Yes, there we go.
On the chat. It also came with all the rest of the grading policy. So have at it. Sorry about that.
Enrollment feedback at schools.nyc.gov. That's enrollment feedback, one word, at schools.nyc.gov. We appreciate that. If we can get back into the Q&A, because the numbers just keep rising in terms of the questions.
Yes. Okay.
Monica, you're on.
Thank you, Borough President. Okay, question from Rocky Bonanno in regard to the District 28 Diversity Plan. I understand the money being used for it was specifically earmarked for that reason, but at a time when the DOE is facing enormous budget cuts, give one valid reason why the diversity plan cannot be scrapped entirely or revisited when there is a return to normalcy, and the money be used to help fill in key areas of the education budget deficit.
Yes, so we do have an enormous budget deficit. That's absolutely correct. And so we're all very sensitive to that and sort of clenching our teeth for what that means in the coming years for New York City in general. So all of the citywide and district diversity plans were put on pause. There's no way to do equitable engagement just over Zoom. And a lot of people are dealing with so much else, including collective grief of family members. So that's put on pause. We're not currently working with the consultant in that way. And so, when things resume, we obviously think pursuing equity and excellence, and school diversity is noble and worthy, but I'm not sure what that looks like going forward. So all I can say is right now, definitively, it's on pause in District 28, but really all across the city.
Okay, this question is from Ariana Palacio. I would like to know when the meetings will begin in the boroughs regarding the grade policy in order for parents to discuss the 2021 new school year. Anybody?
So the grade, was that on grading policy?
Grade policy. Mm-hmm.
Katie, did you catch that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think there's going to be any changes for the 2021 school year at this time. I think this will depend on what happens with school and what that looks like in the upcoming months. As of right now, our current plan is to use this policy for the remainder of the school year, and then hopefully be able to resume our previous grading policy.
You mean the grading policy?
Okay. Yeah.
That's what was asked, correct?
Yeah, Queensborough President Lee, I'm seeing, I think they're interchanged in some of the Q&A. So would be helpful if you wanted, I don't know if we can ask folks, but just to clarify if it's grading policy or admissions, because I'm seeing one that the DOE did already put out a grading policy, which is correct. But we
Right.
don't have an admissions policy. A lot of jargon flying around. So just want to try to be clear on that.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification, a much needed clarification. And hello to your deputy over there. They're making
Is it a Zoom
cameo.
meeting if your
It
kid
is a
doesn't?
Zoom meeting. Yes. Yes.
Is it even a work event if my
Yes.
kid doesn't show up in a Zoom?
And for the to be determined policy on screened admissions, what I'm hearing from parents, and I'd like to put forth to your attention since we're here,
Please.
to make sure that we have robust discussion and engagement and full discourse on any policy changes, so that there isn't this perception, and I call it a perception, at best, a perception that the pandemic is being used to make some sort of wholesale change to policies or like permanent changes to the policies. I think that's something that if you can give us some assurance or reassurance here that there are no wholesale policy changes, it's not a permanent change. If any changes that have been made in terms of decisions on, the grading policy, I think I heard that was a 1 year, that applies for 1 year. It's not a wholesale change. But certainly for the screened admissions policies that we're awaiting, many parents are eagerly awaiting that be made after robust discourse and certainly discourse before wholesale change.
Yes, absolutely. And so, as I said, we are in the midst of our engagement. We are making these changes in response to the pandemic, and they will go into effect for 1 year. So yes.
Can I just jump into that? Sure. Some of what we heard over the last week through the BP's office is that parents want to communicate that there is probably not a one-size-fits-all solution here on admissions. And the other thing that came through very clearly in our discussions was that the CECs want individual input and that the ECC does not necessarily represent each individual CC and location within the city.
Thank you, Deb, for that.
Thank you for that. Yes.
Yeah, and I would just say that, and if I misspoke or conveyed something wrong, or maybe it was my earring, I was trying to look nice for you guys, that the ECC doesn't represent all CEC presidents at all, but that it is a citywide group that we have gone to, and that CECs should absolutely be encouraged to have these conversations. Because of the spirit of the time and the uncertainty of the world we're in, we don't actually have, we're not going to go to every single CEC, but we do welcome every single CEC's feedback, 100%.
Okay, let's see. Will the DOE establish a universal grading rubric citywide?
So our policy applies, our policy that we came out with for our grading policy during remote instruction is a citywide policy.
Okay, let's see. Let's see.
There are some strong feelings about the ECC.
Oh yeah.
This webinar. But
Yeah,
let's go into some of the questions.
Here. Okay, so if
questions on substance.
If schools reopen in September, open in shifts, will there be more structure, possibly virtual classrooms for each period? Can assignments be put into one platform instead of spread out through multiple platforms? And can parents be provided a separate login to view assignments and grades in one place, or possibly an email from teachers weekly or bi-weekly with the information and feedback?
I'm sorry. So we want to repeat, what was the end of the question? Just like feed?
Yeah, so basically, can parents be provided a separate login to view assignments and grades in one place, or possibly an email from teachers weekly or bi-weekly with the information and feedback? Parents are upset that the student doesn't have that interaction as much with the teachers. And so a student has to wait, until the teacher is available again through email. There's about like a 2-hour span. So parents are upset about that. And if more time can be provided for the student to contact the teacher.
I'm not clear on the question, Monica.
Yeah, they just.
Can you help synthesize that question? What's the question?
I guess I'll jump in.
Yep.
When we return to the classroom in September, would there be more of a regular schedule for students with teaching aside from just the basic learning component that's been happening, especially at the upper levels?
Right.
So I think I can jump into this. These are all things that we are exploring and we are looking at right now and having discussions about. I think, like somebody said before, it's tricky right now because a lot of this depends on information from the Department of Health and from the state. Like somebody said, we have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C that we're working on, and all of these things are being taken into account.
Okay. Here's another. Okay, so why can't the DOE give parents for K to 8 graders a choice of grading policy between the binary system of meet standards or needs improvement and the regular grading system?
So when we were working on the grading policy, a lot of things were taken into account. And one of the guiding pieces was thinking about flexibility and taking into account all that our families and students have been through during this time, and wanting to recognize that, and that looking at what other school districts were doing around the country, getting feedback, and at this time, the binary policy for our youngest students, like we said before, especially given the work and role that our families are playing, that we went with a binary system at this time. But what is part of our grading policy is that the marking period grades are in place. It is just the final grade that's going to be the binary system.
Okay. Let's see here. This is by Lamar Nashur. Can you keep the grades and attendance earned until March and let the parents and students choose between a pass or grade marked for the last semester only? Use those grades for admissions. These questions.
I think Sarah and I can, so on a student's report card, you will see all of the grades that they had earned until this point. And that's feedback that we got, and we hear it loud and clear. And so it'll be grades that were earned earlier this year will show up on the student's report card or transcript. And then I'll let Sarah speak to the admission.
Yeah, so one of the questions that we are sort of grappling with and asking stakeholders about is if grades should be used, how they should be used, which grade should be used. All of those questions are on the table. And so I'm glad that you're raising it here in the chat. I will get the transcript of the chat, I suspect. So this is very helpful for us to hear from here as well.
Okay, thanks. What are the plans? What are the plans to reopen schools? Is the plan written for the public to read and review?
No, not yet. The plan to reopen schools is, again, optimistically, we'd love to see everything as it once was and send our kids off like we have, but we're thinking through every minute detail from cafeteria lunches to dismissals and to the PPE that might be required of our teachers, et cetera. So the list goes on, but when we do, we will broadcast that loud and clear for sure. But we want to make sure that and if people are asking you as community leaders, that we're prioritizing the health and safety, and of course we're taking the health cues for what's possible and what conditions lend themselves.
And we do recognize that it's still very much a moving target, even though we are closer to reopening in various phases. But we are sensing the increased frustration by parents, which I can tell that you all are already very well aware and empathetic to. And I know some of these questions may sound a little redundant, but we thank you for answering them again and again. I think there are people who are coming in and out here and there. We want to make sure that everybody who's submitted a question or typed in a question is heard and is addressed, as many as possible. Monica, back to you.
Thank you, Borough President. Okay, here's a different question submitted by Elisa O'Shea. How will students with special needs be evaluated in time for September placements if the 60-day rule is no longer in effect?
So I have a question. I don't know if we can clarify. Do they mean for students with initial evaluations?
I believe so. Let's see.
But we are exploring what to do for students for initial evaluations now. We're working with our psychologists about that. And then for students with existing IEPs, our IEP meetings are being held, just being held remotely. And if the parent has any particular questions, they can reach out to special education at schools.nyc.gov, and we can put that in the chat, and someone can follow up with them.
Thank you.
No problem.
Monica, if I may, going back to the grading, I heard from some of the CECs in the past several days the suggestion or the inclined for the high school model. So having grades and then also a pass-fail indicator as well. Others I'm hearing to make sure that the first 2/3 of the year count, that they were not in vain. I'm sure you've heard this before, but I wanted to put that on the table while we have a chance and while we were near the topic.
Okay, let's see. Remote learning has not been sufficient. Children aren't doing enough work. What is the deal? So I guess this parent wants more work for their kids. I know we've gotten a lot of emails from parents who want their child to be more busy because they finish their work pretty quickly. So basically, what is the DOE doing to keep kids busy and helping parents at the same time, right?
Katie, I'm going to toss this to you just on content and like how we're communicating with teachers and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, sure. So we are, so since we've rolled out remote learning, we understand that our teachers are coming at this from different places. And just like as educators, just as we would differentiate for our students, it's been really important for us to differentiate for our staff and for our teachers to meet them where they are so that they have the tools to support students. As part of remote learning, we rolled out what we're calling our Teach Hub that has materials, instructional standards-based instructional materials that teachers can use right in their Google Classrooms, as well as information and resources that has been generously donated by third-party vendors for use during this time. And so we will continue to provide professional development for our teachers so that we are supporting our students and our families. We also do have learning activities on our website at schools.nyc.gov at Learn at Home.
Okay. All right. How has the DOE specifically engaged with 4th and 7th grade parents, since they are purportedly the only ones impacted?
I think we can say that I have personally spoken to some 7th grade parents. I would have to check on 4th grade parents. I spoke to some middle school students today. But I think that we're using this opportunity to hear from many different people, as you know, it is 1 year, but to a parent's point that, you know, if you enter your kid in 6th grade, it's not a 1 year commitment. So we really are trying to talk to as many folks as possible. But if you have any, you know, 4th graders or 7th grade families, please either send them our way, and we'd love to hear from them.
Okay, this question submitted by Michelle Lee. What is the timing of when DOE will make a decision?
So we have to finish our engagements, our rounds of engagement, and then we can come back to you with the timeline with the timeline after we finish our engagements.
Okay, thank you. All right, this one, how will screen middle and high schools create a fair application process for IEP seats without the use of final grades, state test scores, and attendance criteria?
So this was for students with IEPs, right? You went out just for one.
Mhm.
So we did meet with the Arise Coalition this week. Our office, the Office of Student Enrollment, is working very, very closely with the Special Education Office. We have students with disabilities at top of mind, and we will ensure that they are, just like they do now, have a fair admissions process with any changes that should come about.
Let's see. To alleviate uncertainty, can the DOE publish its plans for the fall and what criteria leads to each option?
For reopening or?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Certainly when we get someplace, we will publish all of our considerations and why we have arrived there. Absolutely.
What is the guarantee that one-year term will be held to? And they mean about the grading policy.
I'm sorry, I'm unclear about that question. What does that mean?
I think what we can say is that the grading policy was created in response to COVID-19 and its impacts on us this semester. I don't think that it would be fair for Katie or anyone on this phone to say exactly what that might look like from September going forward. So I think we will need, with everything we're doing, constant reevaluation and an ongoing communication with families like you, and of course with elected officials like you.
Okay. Is anyone reaching out to the parent associations and PTAs for their input?
Absolutely. We have school-based teams that operate out of sort of bigger borough teams in the division of family and community engagement. And those folks have been, calling local PTA members and presidents and others. We've also asked that PTA presidents, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, and CECs fill out a questionnaire. Is that correct? Yeah, so we have asked that they also give feedback that way.
That's correct.
All right. Are you aware that my students' accounts only show final grade and not all the marking periods? So who is seeing the first 3 marking periods? Now, not one, yeah. So can, let's see.
I can follow up about that. Let me get back to you.
Okay. All right. So we need to mark this. All right.
Can I just say, like, just from a parent looking at pupil path at any, whether you're on schedule a pupil path or some other form, you can call up the grades for the whole year to date, so we can see everything. And then when the final grade goes to my students, it's the final, keeping in mind that some of those grading systems are progressive. So it's just a point in time grade for the parent and the student to see. And it's ultimately the final grade that appears on that my student account.
Okay.
I believe.
Thanks, Deb. When do engagements finish? And again, for the grading policy.
I think admissions.
I think
policy for that one.
admission.
I'm sorry. Yes.
No, it's okay.
So Sadie, so you can help me here. So the town halls are finished, I think next week, or perhaps the week after next week. And then there will be some additional engagements that throughout the next couple of weeks. I'm sure that I can't give an exact end because we want to continue engaging to the very last possible moment. But I would suspect within the next few weeks there will be a slowdown on engagement. But that doesn't mean we will stop if other groups are, if we haven't heard from other groups.
Thank you. What is the DOE proposing as an admission system if academic screens are removed? How will they support academically advanced students?
So again, we don't have a policy or anything definitive at this point. That is certainly an option that we are hearing, and that is something that we have to think through if that is a decision that is made. But right now, there have been no decisions, and we want to hear what families are thinking and saying.
Thank you. Beyond just community engagement, will the DOE send out a survey similar to the online learning that they sent out?
Yeah, so thank you for filling that out. We got a tremendous response on our remote learning survey, and so we're very thankful. Yes, Katie?
Still open. It's still open
And
this
still
week.
open. If you haven't, do it. It's important.
It closes this week.
Oh, good. Thank you. So good. I'm glad you asked. But we also have the survey regarding the, let me not now do this, admissions policy for CEC presidents, sorry, for PTA presidents and CEC members. PTA members. So I don't know when that closes, but let me see if I can try to get a link for that. Or I can send it to you guys after.
Thank you. What will the transcripts look like for 11th grade students applying for colleges?
So for our 11th graders and for high school students, it will either have their grades, so it would use their normal marking period scale, or if the family and student chooses to, it would have a CR for credit on their transcript. And on the transcript, we would also have language about what that means and about, recognizing this time period. We've also, our post-secondary team has also been doing engagements with CUNY, with SUNY, and we know that other districts have taken a Pascal policy for all of their students. So we know that, everyone's in this right now. And so we would have a way to recognize if they chose to have the credit. And we know that this is something that schools would be thinking about during this time, as part of this time, for students to choose to keep their final grade. The regular marking scale, the regular grading scale that their school uses would be on their transcript.
Okay, so this one's a little different. Why do parents in Queens with several children only given one device?
Yes.
Older children who have to submit papers get to use them first, and younger children in Queens are at a deficit not having a device to use.
Yes, I want to thank you for that question. I apologize that we hadn't gotten to that earlier. We actually are asking folks if they need devices to fill out one survey per child. And so there are instances where folks are getting more than one for multiple children. Let me put that link, if it's still around, let me just try to find it in the chat so that you guys can get that. But that's misinformation. We want to make sure that all of your children can get access to tablets if possible.
Just going to ask everybody putting in questions to please be clear. I see, a lot of information in here. Just be clear with your questions. We want to maximize our time here with the DOE. How can the public be assured that the DOE will be making decisions based on a level playing field?
Sorry, I'm trying to sometimes follow along with you, but what is this?
It says, how can the public be assured that the DOE will be making decisions based on a level playing field?
That's a very good question. I think that's the goal. I think that, when we are able to hear from as many families as possible, when we are able to center our most vulnerable students, our most marginal students, marginalized, communities, our multilingual learners, our students in temporary housing, I think the theory of action is if we're able to center them and serve them, then we will not only have an equitable system, but excellent outcomes for all of our students, right? So I think that's the goal. And of course, this type of civic engagement helps hold us accountable to doing so.
Thank you. Why did the DOE go to the ECC?
It's a citywide group of parent leaders. And so.
Let's see.
And Monica, can we make sure that we're uplifting the questions that are in the Q&A portion of the chat?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing, but it's just people are writing so much that I have to find the question within what they're writing. So please, I just ask everybody to please be clear.
Let me jump in. I saw an interesting question, if you don't mind, Borough President.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Carolina.
Why was the survey just sent to CECs and PTA presidents and not to parents? And this is the survey for the new admission policy.
That's a great question. And I think it was a matter of just like time and trying to get sort of as much representation as possible and quickly. But Sarah, is that right? If there's something else, my brain, yeah, okay. That's why.
Okay, let's see. As far as the grading policy, why is it that students only have to submit attendance and they can pass?
So our grading policy is not based on attendance. We actually took attendance out of our grading policy for this semester based on the situation at hand. And students' grades will be based on the work that is being done during this time.
Okay.
Katie, can I
Yeah.
just interject there? I think
Sure.
there's some confusion because of the check-in system that students are being asked to engage in every day. So some people think that's attendance, but is there another reason for that engagement? Is that a health and wellness engagement? I think people are confused. If you could just explain what they're actually doing when they're calling in or checking in, whatever.
Sure. So I think we wanted to have a mechanism to check in our students for a multitude of reasons that we wanted to make sure we wanted check-ins for health and safety. We wanted check-ins that are academic and checking in on the work that students are doing. And so that's why our attendance and engagement policy, that there were multiple modes for schools to engage with our students. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I just want to make sure, like, she's asking attendance. So I think people think that if their child doesn't check in that day, that they might not be being counted. So just, I think you explained it in that the attendance policy has been waived during this crisis to an extent, and won't be counted for taking them to the next level. Correct?
Thanks.
I saw Ms. Maro mouth correct.
Yeah. Oh, am I on mute? No. And also I heard, just for the NICSA question that came up before, I've been able to confirm that marking period grades are in NICSA. So we do have that there, and it was similar to what Deb was talking about, that you are able to see the other marking period grades. If the person who would ask that question, if they're in elementary school, middle school, or high school, I'm happy to answer if there are further questions.
All right. Why are surveys only sent to PTA presidents?
Yep, we answered this one. Obviously, I'm going back to the team just as we are chatting in real life to just make sure I'm answering this correctly. I think it's because we're on a short timeline and we want to make sure that we definitely reach all PTA presidents. But that's really good feedback, and we'll get back to you on that.
Thanks.
And there was a suggestion in the chat room, and I'm loath to jump back and forth between the chat and the Q&A. But there was an interesting suggestion. Is it possible to use the same survey method and process as used to request the devices to collect feedback on the admissions process? If cumbersome, perhaps limit outreach to parents of middle and high school students only. Is that something that would be possible?
You know, I hate these kind of answers from the DOE.
Anything's possible.
Anything's possible. It lives in a totally different shop because we're managing a bunch of devices out of DIIT. And so we built that specific system for that thing.
Yeah.
That doesn't make it right. I'm not saying that that's a perfect answer, but I think it's worth
an honest
exploring.
It's an honest answer.
You can count on me for that.
Yeah.
But it's worth exploring, and so appreciate lifting that up. It took a long time to stand up those phone lines for the device, specifically in other languages, and so thinking through how we make sure that the surveys and access it to who can fill out a survey and what language and access to the language it was really important. So I think that was another factor into it as well.
And one thing to add here too is that we are monitoring very closely that inbox. So if there is feedback that you want to give to us, please definitely reach out to us in enrollment feedback at schools.nyc.gov. We are looking at all of the feedback that we're receiving there and having it inform the policy that will be issued when it's ready.
And could you repeat that in case there are people who are just tuning in?
Yep, it's enrollment feedback at schools.nyc.gov. And I think, Sadie, you may have put it in the chat as well.
Yeah, but it's probably getting swallowed up by...
Yeah, keep putting it in there. Yep.
Yeah, I'll just keep putting it in there.
Okay, this one's a suggestion in the chat room by Irene. Survey is a good idea, but it should be elementary, middle school students, not high schools. High school students are not applying to schools anymore.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Why weren't the CECs in Queens contacted for the grading policy when the Brooklyn CEC 15 was contacted by the DOE?
So all CECs should have been contacted for the grading policy and the admissions policy. So two different things on the table. One was already put forth, guidance was already issued, and that's why we have Katie Maro out. We also are talking about admissions policy based on the fact that we won't have ELA scores and MAP scores. So we're talking about admissions for selective screen schools. And so the question is, I'm sorry, what was the end question? I just wanted to make sure we're clarifying it. Why did we go to only CEC? We should have gone to all. The answer is you should hear from all CECs should have been contacted. There's no world where only one CEC is contacted.
Yeah, some of the CECs feel that they weren't contacted. Let's see. Excuse me. This was already answered, but looks like, let's see, will the new admissions just be used? But this is just another question for this year or for the future as well, the new admissions process.
So this will go into effect for 1 year, and it is, the changes are in the response to the pandemic.
Okay, when the policy is announced, will the DOE publish the results of all these feedback sessions, including the organizations consulted and what their opinions were?
I think that's interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, you're saying yes? Okay,
Yes.
cool. Awesome. Then yes, great. Love that.
Great. Another parent, make public, it's just a comment, make public the record of who DOE engaged for admission policy before announcements of admission policy, including screens for middle and high schools. Again, they're writing a lot, so I have to find the question in all of that writing.
I'd like to take this moment to thank my team for reading through a lot of the questions. I can already see the number just keeps ticking up. And thank you also to the officials from the DOE for being as thorough as possible and as honest as possible, even if it may not be what we want to hear. It is as honest as possible, and we do appreciate that. And we have at least 40 more minutes of this fun. But again, thank you. This is it's good for us to hear directly, especially I'm hearing, some CECs weren't contacted, this and that. Well, we have parent advisory board as well. It doesn't excuse it, but this is where we can register some of those concerns.
Thank you, Borough President.
Can I also just lift up, and I know question and answer is really important, but
Yes, please.
this is if you do have ideas,
Yes.
and if you do say, I'm seeing someone over here said, would you consider lottery, or when you consider lottery? We heard some very creative ideas from students in temporary housing today, and some other ideas from students actually, sort of overlaying, COVID impacted areas, and then somebody else said, could there be a students in temporary housing priority? So any ideas? I think that the opportunity that these moments where we just haven't been in this world has created is like creativity is actually really welcome. And so if you have questions, that's great, and we're here to answer them. But also, if you have ideas for what is a fair admissions policy for middle and high schools for the year 2021-22, please do share them as well. We're all ears.
Thank you. What will grading be like the first semester going back into the classroom school when many children will be behind and not do well on assessments?
So our grading policy is currently for this semester, and depending on what returning to school looks like, depending on a lot of factors, we will have more information and be able to come out with something then.
Thank you. As a member of the PA and PTA into schools, we have not been reached out to. How are you reaching out to us? I'm not sure what I'm missing. So basically,
let me just say that any PTA member or PTA president here on the call, and I'm just checking, I'm trying to fact check as well, should reach out to their FACE liaison and say, hey, we have some ideas. We'd love to, get together and share them. We have whatever it is. There should be a liaison that's directly in contact with you and working with you daily or monthly, at the very least monthly already. So please use that channel. Of course, you can also always CC the enrollment. I already got an email while I was here saying, hey, send me that link. And so we'll make sure that we do send the links to folks and remind our FACE liaisons to do extra and ongoing engagement with you all.
Thank you. Is there any discussion of doing away with honors classes in junior high school?
What was the question one more time?
Is there any discussion of doing away with honors classes in junior high school?
So that's those are school-based decisions, but at this time, no. That's I don't believe that's something that we're discussing.
Thank you. How will pupil path maintain marking period specific grades in the future if and when final grades wipe out marking period specific grades once the school year is over? Will the DOE systems be reviewed and updated if necessary to maintain these marking period specific grades to ensure those marking period grades will be on our students' transcripts?
So marking period grades will still be on a student's transcript, on student report cards. The final grades will not be wiping out other grades.
Okay, thank you. Why can't we open up all the survey to all parents? This will more accurately reflect views of constituents.
I think that that's a really interesting idea. I think it would more accurately reflect constituents if we were to ensure that it was in multiple languages, that it was available over the phone. You know, there's still a large digital literacy divide. So I think that we're trying to weigh all of those things to make sure that everyone has access to whatever we're doing here, and that's a survey. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't do a better job. So we're taking all that in, and so appreciate the feedback.
Thank you. Another survey. Why are surveys only sent to PTA presidents?
I just answered. I feel like I does. Yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna jump in with a different question. I know it's not the topic tonight, but some parents are concerned with still not getting FaceTime with teachers or screen classes. So I just wanted to bring that up. Some parents are still very concerned that students are not getting enough FaceTime with the teachers. So if you guys can bring that back to DOE, that would be great.
Yeah,
we can definitely bring that back, and please know that it's something that we are discussing and working with our stakeholders and partners on right now. I think something that's important, you know, just to share and for the sake of transparency, the original plan for remote learning came out in mid-March, and our plan was to, and we stood up remote learning, and the original plan was for it to be through April 20th and to return to schools on April 20th. And when we were first coming out with guidance, thinking that we would be back in schools for the end of the school year, the way it was framed was that synchronous instruction or live instruction is a best practice. We hear this from our families. We hear this from our stakeholders, and we are exploring what guidance could look like for this. And part of our summer school will be, since we know that these are going to be students who may require additional support, that there will be synchronous instruction during summer school for sure.
Thank you.
Can I just repeat, and this is a good opportunity, is that, you know, if any parent is having any issues with their school, we obviously always say start with your teacher, but then please do go to your principal, and then as needed, please do reach out to your local superintendent, and you know, CC obviously anyone that you like, but we really are encouraging folks to sort of stay in that frame, because of course Katie is wonderfully responsive, and I don't know when she sleeps, but I also want to make sure that we're sort of following those protocols so that everybody feels empowered to, like, oh, where do I go? We go to our school, our teacher, we go to our principal. Of course, parent coordinators should be helpful. If folks are multilingual learner families and feel like they can't communicate well with their teachers, their principal should be prepared to work with their field language access coordinator, their FLAC, and every district has one. So just want to make sure that folks at least are aware of the protocol for where to go, because that's an important one.
Thanks, Sadie.
Yeah.
I have a good question here. There's a lack of representation of parents on the mayor's education working group. It seems to only be specifically for education groups. How can we get a parent representative per borough in this committee? Is that something that you guys can address?
So, yeah. So, so for folks who may not know, the mayor announced he was going to have about 4 task forces all around reopening. And considering that none of these task forces would issue any policy recommendations, they would be sounding boards, they would be opportunities to have exchange of ideas, and of course, you know, debate. But I do want to say that we worked with City Hall pretty closely on this one and said, you know, you really need to put on some parents, and they put on a couple of parent organizations. And I believe they put on 1 CEC member, but I realize that that's not, you know, representative of the city. And so if there's anything, and I know that's from Jessica, who I actually have worked with before. Hi, Jessica. You know, if there's anything specific that we want them to know, I'm happy to be a conduit there and either put you in touch with the right folks at City Hall, or of course, pass along the feedback.
Yes, I think when this question piggybacks on that, can there be a list provided of the parent organizations that were reached out to that are part of this task force?
So that, yes, absolutely. The task force is public, but I actually have a feeling that please provide the full list was related to admissions policy feedback. Is that? I get.
No, I think this was mostly for that group, for the task force, because you mentioned some parent groups were reached out. So, you know, parents would like to know what groups those are.
For the mayor's task force, I can just, so let me see if I can track it down here. I can send you the list of who is on that task force.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for acknowledging.
That's something that also parents like task forces.
Okay.
If parents would like to know who their FACE liaisons are, where do they find that information? This question is particular for District 28. They like to know who their FACE liaison is, but if we could just share where parents can find that up, that would be great.
That is a great question. Where do parents find that out? Let me find that out. For District 28, for the CEC, remember they're school-based and then there's district-based liaisons. And so for the CEC, it's my colleague Paula DeCock, but I'm not sure for the school-based. I don't know who was, I actually don't see the, I didn't see the question, who the question's coming from. So I don't know if it's for the PTA, but I hope that that's helpful. And Paula or myself, I can put you in contact. I can put my email up here if you guys want it. You can always email me.
Thank you, Sadie. Why can't summer school be an opportunity for K-8 students to catch up so that all students can have a number grade instead of a binary grade before fall?
So when thinking about our summer programming, we wanted to make sure that the focus was on supporting our students who may have been missing work during this time, who may have fallen behind during this time. And so the focus for our summer school is on our 3 through 12 students. And then also, of course, our students with 12-month IEPs.
Thank you. Okay, what improvements does the DOE expect from removing screen admissions? How will improvements be measured?
So just let me repeat the question. What improvements?
Yeah, what improvements does the DOE expect from removing screen admissions? How will improvements be measured?
So nothing has been removed as of yet. Again, there's no decision on that. So I want to make that very clear that nothing has been removed. And in terms of improvements on the admissions process, improvements for schools in terms of instruction, I'm not clear. I'm sorry that I'm not clear.
Let me see.
Okay, I have a question. I'm not sure if you guys can answer, but can Enrollment publish a real-time map of available gifted and talented seats across the city so the parents of students who qualify but didn't get their applied schools can see where their available seats are?
He stole my question. Go ahead.
So we can get back to you in terms of seat availability at schools. I think that when gifted and talented offers go out, we do have a waitlist mechanism that is in place at all schools that have gifted and talented programs. Schools manage their waitlists. So if a youngster or a family declines a seat at a gifted and talented program, the school manages their waitlist, much like they do for kindergarten. They also do that for gifted and talented. So I can get back to you around any sort of seat availability, but schools, gifted and talented programs do have waitlists, and schools do manage their waitlists and fill the seats when families decline the offers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Why is no live instruction required? Is this a UFT issue?
So when we were, just as we wanted to be flexible and understanding of what our students were going through during this time, we understand that our teachers also have our caregivers, have families, may be sick, maybe taking care of loved ones who are sick. And when we were rolling out remote instruction, the idea of having more flexibility, people could, the students could, videos could be posted, and students could engage, knowing that at the beginning, not everyone had a device, and that there may have been students sharing devices, so we didn't want them to be penalized if there was live instruction. So these were all things that went into this initial decision, and now we are looking into how we can roll this out, knowing the difficulties that sometimes families are still facing during this.
Thanks. Can the DOE publish a schedule when it will make decisions for the fall and then publish the decisions? This will help eliminate the answer we keep hearing. We have not decided yet.
I know this is a question that we keep hearing, but we appreciate the reiteration for some of these answers as well.
Will the DOE publish the schedule? I believe that was Morris, right? I'm trying to scroll back up to it where it was. I think that, I think that to the extent that you're asking that we be super communicative and over communicative and publish all of the things, we actually have been using our website in I think a more sort of efficient and simple way. I'm trying to find this question. I don't know where it is. I'm sorry, Morris, but in essence, you're asking for us to publish a schedule.
Yes, of when a decision, when the DOE expects to have a decision, because I think they hear a lot. We'll get back to you. We'll get back to you.
Yes, I mean, and then that's partially because we're sort of all living in a a moving target, but I appreciate it, and we'll definitely communicate that out to our communications folks to see how we can sort of make for a clearer sequencing for families. I know that could bring comfort, so appreciate it.
I think that would be very helpful. Sometimes the unknown is the worst, right? And it's a sustained existence of unknown for a while now. Not within your control, but any additional communications would be, I think, helpful.
Here's a concern for parents. Not every CSC is holding special meetings to reach out to their constituents for their views on the admission policy changes. Are there any checks and balances in place to ensure the CECs are following protocols to get the community engagement necessary that they represent their district?
So, and this is why engagements like this are really important. I think Sarah and I and Gabby can go back to the team and say, hey, folks haven't gotten contacted yet. And so, we need to make sure that our liaisons are doing those calls and at least starting the conversations and making sure that about the different ways you can get involved. We hope that the borough public engagement sessions, where again we will lead with each district community parent leader to say something. We think that those are really good opportunities for us to, and for our DOE cabinet members to hear from you guys and to hear from each district directly. So no, it's imperfect, but we'll definitely take that feedback and say, hey guys, let's give folks an additional call and more engagement.
Thank you. Will there be a more standard of teaching during remote learning? Math really requires some kind of either live or taped instruction.
So like we said, these are, and like Sadye said, that if there are concerns, we definitely would want you to reach out to your teachers or to your principals or to your superintendents. There should be some kind of instruction taking place for our students. And whether that's synchronous, whether that's video recording, we want to make sure those supports are in place for our students.
Thank you. Okay, it says, question from a parent, please explain how the equality-based learning will not downgrade the quality of our children's basic education.
So and it was one of the things that was so important when standing up with remote learning policy. So we've just like with instruction in our brick and mortar schools, we wanted to ensure that professional development is taking place for our teachers, so that there are supports and resources for how to do this. It's why we've provided instructional materials. So if teachers needed more support about how to get accustomed to remote learning, that they could focus on that, and we would be providing materials. We have other resources posted on our Teach Hub, because we want to ensure that we are still supporting our students, and students are still receiving an education during this time.
Here's a concern from a parent on how this engagement town halls are going to work. How can parents give feedback on an admission system proposal without a proposal on the table? We have no idea what would replace screens, so how can we comment? So what will tomorrow's event for Queens look like?
A
And
bit of a chicken or the egg situation, huh?
Well, I think you raise a really important point, which is that we have to spend some time during the presentation and during the engagements and just like sort of level setting, this is what a screen is, this is what we mean, so that people can then react to some of the things that they've heard. I think Sarah went through this earlier, but maybe should again on the like, what are some things that we are hearing around the previous years? Maybe that's like worth lifting up, because obviously we've all said a lot this evening, but we can say what what could be considered or what we're hearing, and then we're giving folks something to react to.
Yeah, so I'm happy to do that again. So we are hearing from some groups calling for a suspension of screens. We are hearing perhaps to proceed with potential substitute data, which perhaps could be marking period grades for students prior to the crisis. It could be previous year final grades, like the third grade and the third grade and sixth grade. It could be previous year's test scores, which would be third grade tests and sixth grade tests. It could be other factors that we haven't thought about. So those are ideas and suggestions that we have heard throughout the city. So, and we, as Sadye said earlier, we want to hear more. So this would be a place, the enrollment email would be a place to hear more. And certainly at these town halls, we're going to hear more as well, as Gabby said, from a wider swath of families.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What budget cuts are expected for our schools and programs?
Hang on one second. Let me pull up a correct document so that I can share. City and state budget crisis, projected state budget deficit of about $12 billion. So we're facing cuts. The New York City DOE specifically is facing $150 million cut for fiscal year 20 and $470 million year cut for fiscal year 21. And so those types of cuts that we have shared, but I'm happy to share here, of course, are some fair student funding reduction in prioritizing schools that have over 100% in fair student funding, and that's a $100 million cut for fiscal year 21. Operational savings over time in trainings, overtime, materials at school, central and field, as well as other things due to the school building closures. We're seeing about $100 million for fiscal year 20 in that. Some professional development reduction, $67 million for fiscal year 21 and out years. We're going to see some cuts to summer in the city, to single shepherd, to college access for all at the middle school level, at about coming in at about $49 million for fiscal year 21. This will impact the delay in the 3K expansion to districts 1, 12, and 14, as well as 29, which is of course in Queens. And that cut is a $43 million cut for fiscal year 21. We're going to reduce the ATR pool, and we're going to implement a non-ATR hiring freeze at $40 million for fiscal year 21. Unfortunately, the list goes on, but it also includes a delayed installation of some air conditioners at $10 million. We're going to eliminate the district charter partnership program at $4.4 million for fiscal year 21. Civics for All curriculum, supplies, and programming at $3.8 million. We're going to do some budget adjustments to Sonic, which is after school budget, at $5 million. And we're going to scale down contracts to technology, curriculum, and health education certification programs for teachers at $1.8 million. There's also some contract and supply reductions associated with arts programs in the middle and high school levels at $15.5 million. So that's really tough stuff, actually. Hard to read that out. And of course, there's temporary reduction of school allocation memoranda, which provides schools funding to implement programming. And that'll be at $40 million for fiscal year 21. So those are some of the things that we will see. And that's tough. Those are real programs that kids loved, and as well as staff who supported them. So.
Thanks. I'd love to know if there will be any live teaching, if we continue to be remote in the fall, or what other options are being considered for the fall around on-site learning, grading, etc. I feel my son is really missing out with remote only learning and no contact with his teachers. And at the very least, this needs to be addressed at the highest level.
It is definitely something that is being addressed and that we are exploring right now, and thinking about how synchronous instruction could be incorporated, as well as thinking about just what our fall will look like in general.
Thank you. Let's see here. I've been hearing rumors that the DOE is planning to eliminate honors programs in middle schools. I'm wondering if there's any truth to that rumor, especially concern about Junior High School 180, Russell Stage, and Forest Hills and School District 28. Katie, maybe?
I don't.
Well, can you repeat the question? It went in and out. I'm sorry.
Was this the honors program at junior high school?
Yeah, so I've been hearing rumors the DOE is planning to eliminate honors programs in middle schools. I'm wondering if there's any truth to that rumor.
So, like we said earlier, those are school-based decisions, and those are school-based programs that principals and administrators would and decisions they would be making.
Thank you. Will there be more food hubs opened in Queens as needed?
Great question on the food hubs. So if there is a specific location or area that you feel like we need to be in, and there's a sort of a gap there, I'd love for you to follow up with Monica Gutierrez, and who can come back to us so that we can figure that out. I'm trying to pull up my sort of meal distribution here. So we're serving about 500,000 meals a day, and we are now serving halal meals and vegetarian meals. So we've, as of Monday, April 6th, begun making free meals available for students and adults. Just to say it again, there's no registration necessary. You don't need an ID or anything to come pick it up. We continue to expand meal sites and want to keep doing it. We have 475 sites throughout the city, and we're averaging right at about 485,000 meals a day. Actually, I think it's gone up. And just for a nice fun fact, we have distributed 11 million meals since mid-March. So we will continue to expand. Again, please go through the Queens Borough President's office to let us know where there are gaps, and we'd love to fill them. But that's all on meals right now.
Thank you. Can parents be provided a separate login to view assignments and grades in one place?
Sorry, do you mean like final grades or?
Just the assignments that the kids get.
Oh, so like access to their child's like Google Classroom?
Mm-hmm, correct.
So we are exploring what a more robust system could look like, and currently that's not something that we have in place as we are moving to having these systems. These are things that we can explore.
Right.
What parent access could look like.
Thanks. And then, you know, he just has a follow-up to that. Can assignments be put into one platform instead of spread out through multiple platforms?
So that is definitely something we are currently working on and looking at. We have heard, and that's why I think one of the great things that has come out of this is the engagement and hearing so regularly from our parents, and that is something that we have been hearing. And so we are exploring what that could look like.
Thank you. If schools reopen in September or open in shifts, will there be more structure, possibly virtual classrooms for each period?
Sorry, I know I sound like a broken record, and my apologies that it's not more information, but these are given that you know, we're planning for multiple scenarios for the fall, thinking about what this could look like, if it's remote, if it's brick and mortar, and coming up with a plan for that. And as soon as we have more information, we will be disseminating it widely.
Thank you.
Has the department come up with the school calendar for 2021? That's actually a good question.
Yes, I thought we had.
We do?
Sadie, I think it's
Is it final, getting to the finish line?
yeah, it's getting close.
Okay, good. It's getting close. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Sure.
Thank you. Teamwork makes the dream work.
So,
Sadie
so
was
we're close
right
to.
Right
We're
before
close
all
to
this
the-
happened, we were approaching releasing a calendar, but given that, you know, that it's part of the planning for next year and what next year could look like, will impact what our calendar looks like.
Oh, I see. Is it fair to ask around when should we anticipate that school calendar? We're talking. I know it's going to be next month, unless, you know, in the next few days, but are we thinking? I know it's a tough.
Yeah, I would need, let me get back to you, because I think
Yeah.
Katie and I are involved, but from different places. So I think,
Right.
yes, as soon as we have it, we will
Right.
let you know. And if we know that it's coming out at the end of any week, we'll be happy to give you a heads up. We're present 100%.
Thank you. And we appreciate that you're being very careful about the accuracy of the information. I hear that in your answers. So thank you for that.
And with the calendar as well, staying on this year, for the high school kids and maybe even some of them G&T middle school kids who would normally end classes because of regents shortly after APs. What is happening with the schedule for them and with the students who would be graduating as well? Because they would be done after the first week in June normally. Anyone know?
The question, what's happening during Regents Week?
No, normally your high school kids and actually some of your G&T middle kids would be taking regents and they would be finished with their classwork, so they wouldn't have to show up at school because essentially their classwork would be done after APs and regents. So what is happening with the instruction for that segment of population? Are they finished instruction as of May 30th? Are they continuing till June 15th? Do we know?
I don't want to jump the gun. I don't want to jump the gun, Katie. I think that they are finished with instruction, because I think that I've heard that Regents Week is not an instruction week.
Okay, so if we
Katie will fact check me on that.
some clarification on that would be nice. for families, even if we put it out on the DOE website to help families plan for June. And the other question that I have actually, so I'm just going to jump in about the admissions policy, is that given that we don't have a lot of answers, are we considering transportation, social distancing, overcrowding of schools as far as admissions policies and placement for next year, taking into consideration our kids might not be able to get to places they could have gotten to in the past safely? I know it's a hard question.
I'm glad that you raised it. Actually, we have been thinking about that, and we've heard that from other folks as well. And that's something that we have been thinking about, sort of centrally, all of these factors that we will take into consideration as we continue to listen also to stakeholders. I mean, there are a lot of factors that we have to think about.
Yeah.
And we also want to hear, you know, as things get closer to the opening of school, what the opening of school looks like, et cetera, et cetera. So those things will be taken into consideration, but I'm glad that you raised that here. As I said, we've heard that from families as well. And we just know that in general from our work, our Family Welcome Centers work, and families who are who are currently enrolled in schools and asking for transfers for some of those reasons that you have said.
I'm going to jump in here and just ask a question from one of our parents. She wants to know if she's correct about summer school. This will only be for students that do not meet the standards, or will it be an option for parents to enroll their kids in summer school?
That's a great question. So for summer school, it's slightly more nuanced than that. For our third through 8th graders, it will be students who are not being promoted, or who not meet standards and are recommended by their teacher for summer school. For our high school students, it will be students who receive that course in progress. We'll have the opportunity to make up that course at the during summer school. And it also, for any students who have 12-month IEPs, they will also be part of the summer school program.
I think it's helpful for community members to, or maybe it's not, but to think of our sort of summer programming in two different tracks. One, of course, is childcare, which will be the continuation of the regional enrichment centers. And right now we're serving, you know, first responders, essential workers, students, children, and it's been a phenomenal and necessary service for them. Of course, if health conditions sort of loosen up and all things permitting, we would love to expand that perhaps to, you know, students in shelter or some students with disabilities who would require that in-person, those in-person therapies. Right now, we can't commit to doing that based on health. And then the other track that is what Katie is talking about is around like summer school, summer supports. Parents across the city are asking, you know, what about camp? What about summer youth employment programs? What about the old summer in the cities? What about the enrichment? And I think that's something that we're all spending some time on, because we know it's going to be a challenge. I have a kid at home. He's probably behind me. And it is challenging to think about, you know, what are we going to do with our kids? And so we're, you know, taking that incredibly seriously, and also realizing that, like, without the enrichments and the field trips, like, you know, that really takes away valuable stuff from our kids. So, and I say that with a heavy heart. So we're thinking about that, and we appreciate the question.
Okay, I see the time. It's 7:56 p.m. Borough President, I don't know if we should ask one more question or you want to wrap it up?
Let's try 3 more questions.
Okay. All right. Who gave input for the grading policy?
So we heard from parents, from advocates, from students, from principals, from teachers, and I think that was everyone.
You said students, Katie? You said
Said
advocates?
students, yes, we definitely.
Students,
I think I did.
advocates. Okay, good. Community board members.
How are students engaged?
So that's a great question.
On the grading policy? Oh, sorry,
Yes,
Sadie,
on the
go for it.
grading
Oh,
policy.
on
Great.
grading policy or admissions policy or both or all
No,
or
well,
in general? I'd love to tell you about our good work. No, just
All right,
kidding.
tell us.
Well, first, similar to parents in some ways, we have structures, formal structures for student engagement, like the Borough Student Advisory Councils and the Chancellor's Student Advisory Council. And those are all spring up from different regional, as I said, Borough Student Advisory Councils, which are from different local high school councils. So we stay in close contact with all of those folks. CSAC, which is Chancellor's Student Advisory Council, still meets once a month, probably more. So those are sort of the formal channels that we engage students. There are also a number of student groups and advisories. Either superintendents have their own student advisory council, or there's what we call Mastery Collaborative. I believe somebody actually mentioned it in one of the chats, who has a whole different pedagogical approach around grading. And all of those students from about 50 schools come together and they've given feedback. So we have like sort of open forum, like come and give your feedback. We have the formal, and then we engage with student youth groups. For example, FemStraight, who advocated to make sure that we had feminine hygiene products available at the meal hubs, or Yaya Network, who advocates for the removal of metal detectors, as well as Integrate NYC, Teens Take Charge. I want to say there are some other students in the arts groups that we have talked to. So these are, it's imperfect, but it is robust. I'm very proud of the work that our student voice manager and the student voice team is doing. And so, if you guys have students that you want us to talk to, of course, we're more than willing to come here. And any opportunity that I get to work with the borough president on engaging with students and engaging with families, I'd love to take that opportunity.
Thank you, Sadie. If you remove screens, but keep priorities to some, what programs do you plan to offer to students without priorities to help them get into those schools?
So this is all part of what the feedback that we're hoping to hear. Again, there's no plan at this moment to remove screens. We have heard from some groups that should be considered as an option. And the rest of the question was, and if priorities stay, what was the end of the question?
Let's see, let me find it.
What programs?
Yeah, what programs, where is it? Let me see. Where did it go? I just had it here.
Okay.
As people write it leaves, but
Okay.
I can follow up with you and then follow up with the parent who asked that question.
That would be great.
Right now it's 8 o'clock.
Was the question on school leadership teams approached or addressed? What measures are available for SLTs and district leadership teams to make decisions now that the state exams have been canceled? What measures are available? And how do we now do continuous improvement?
What I can speak to is that it was a discussion with our partners in labor about what DLTs and SLTs should look like in this remote world. And that is, I'm actually going to look to Deb here because I feel like Deb is always knowing about parent leadership structures, maybe more than I am. So Deb, or obviously jump in if you know something, but what I know is that we wanted to sort of figure out what the right way in the remote setting was to establish them. I'm not sure the measured part of that question. But
yeah, I mean, actually, I was sitting, I can't believe you just asked a question about SLTs, because I was sitting here thinking, gee, no one's talked about SLTs today. When
I got the signal, Deb.
when SLTs really are the school-based decision-making authority, and then the DLTs take it the next step for the regions. And in the case of Queens, actually, unfortunately, it had, right before the pandemic, they were going to do a regional-based grouping so that really more of Queens could be represented. And that was going to be used as a pilot. And that, I mean, that just got put on hold. But the SLTs, the communication to the SLTs should actually come through the principals, because the principal isn't necessarily the chair of the SLT, but they are the communication vehicle. And so every SLT member could be alerted to this policy and to give feedback through the principal. I think that would be easy. It would be one Zoom call. SLTs can have meetings 12 months a year, and they're definitely all required to have them in June. So you could get feedback that way. Does that answer somewhat of the question? And the DLTs, I'm sure, are meeting, but you wouldn't get the feedback that you needed for the high schools from the DLTs, because CCHS seems to be that major source, and we all know that that it's not reflective of the city, a portion of the city. But so I think you should go through the principles if possible. Does that help, Sadie?
okay. Yes, it does.
Thumbs up from Ms. Campoamor. So that actually reaches our 8:04 mark. Thank you again to DOE officials for spending the evening with us and answering many dozens of questions. Some of them repeated, but also hopefully it has clarified a lot of things, maybe clarified some of the some confusion or misinformation that might have been out there, or assumptions. I do hear the frustration from parents. I know that the Department of Education is hearing that frustration from parents. And thank you to, we're all public servants. We know that you are doing what you can, but I certainly feel like you did hear folks in the room. We will do our best to make sure that the chat log and the Q&A log are available and shared with you. I think I heard a couple of times the desire to be able to capture all of that, certainly for documenting purposes. And thank you again. We hope to see you again at a parent advisory board meeting sooner than later.
Wonderful.
And could you just reiterate the dates and times and the locations of the Queen, specifically the Queen's engagement sessions coming up?
Absolutely. So tomorrow evening is our Queens Borough listening session with Executive Superintendents Sadye and Spencer. And that'll be from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Thursday, May 28th. And I can, what's the best way? Well, I'll just make sure that Monica gets it. And then if you don't have it already, Monica, and then you can share it.
And I just posted the link on the chat.
Great.
So to see.
Great. And I hear, and for some folks on who have been on the chat, I'm seeing that they're just hearing about this right now, which is why that, the department is considering doing sort of maybe one more. We're doing the borough because we want to make sure we get as much feedback as possible and quickly. But we also are considering maybe adding a citywide so that if we can't make it tomorrow, I recognize that doing things in 24 hours as a parent and a caregiver is impossible at times. So I want to thank you all. I want you guys to keep my email address, even if it's to engage in colorful discussion. I think that it's really important. And I want to thank the Queensborough president and of course her team, Monica, who I've worked with before, and whoever's behind the icon of events at QBPO.
That would be Carolina Gill.
Exactly. Everybody's got a name. So thank you so very much. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Kleinhandler. Thank you, Ms. Maro. Thank you, Ms. Ramos. And thank you, Ms. Campoamor. And of course, Deb Dillingham, thank you. And I think I saw a request to just read that one more time, the website for folks who are tuning in online and not through the webinar chat. Could you just repeat that one more time?
Yep, I'm just on mute. Here we go. schools.nyc.gov/enroll-by-grade-by-admissions-engagement. But I think it's actually schools.nyc.gov/admissions-engagement will get you there. So please be in contact with anything. And I'm Campoamor@schools.nyc.gov. And I personally interface with clergy, community boards, community-based organizations, students, activists, anybody that wants to. I'm here to listen. So thanks.
Especially our parents. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.